You're listening to a tuned in, dropped out production. Thanks, y'all. You're listening to a tuned in, dropped. To go. Hello. Welcome back to Unmasked, the musing of two neurodivergent millennials. I'm Callie.
I'm Alexis.
And we're back. It's kind of right off the bat, I do want to mention on YouTube, we couldn't put neurodivergent. We had to say neurospicy because it was like flagged for some reason.
It's a bad word.
Yeah, it literally was like, you
cannot
cannot say neurodivergent. And I said, interesting. What's your agenda, YouTube?
It also makes me wonder what people have tried to use that word in a sentence as. That could be worrisome. I don't know why or how.
Yeah, it's like, where's this coming from and why are we scared
who
of it?
Ruined neurodivergence?
Who ruined
on
our
YouTube?
reputation?
All of us.
All of us. One slow burnout at a time.
Dropping like little flies.
Getting caught in like the little apple, like fruit fly traps, you know? I got a lot of them right now. The bugs have been like next level this year.
Oh, yes. But I think it's because we keep getting these like warm spikes.
Yeah.
Like even on the like rainy mornings, I'm like, okay. And then by the evening, right before the sun goes down, it's like, it's summer. And you're like, what?
Yeah, the bugs are like,
the bugs
what?
are like, we're trying.
We're trying.
To sustain.
We've died and we've come back many a time this year. And we don't know what season it is.
It's crazy. No, they are. They're everywhere.
Yeah, it is
currently.
crazy. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for joining us. This is our podcast about bugs. We love bugs here.
I don't like bugs that much.
Okay, so we're
like
doing
the pretty one.
We kind of like bugs here.
Like a ladybug.
Yeah, and a butterfly bug.
Yeah.
Stick bugs are kind of sick.
No, there's so many cool bugs. Like I could
when you
sit
think
here
about it
and talk about
there's
bugs.
I'm pretty sure there's a beetle or a fly or a wasp, one of the three, that is like named after Beyonce. And I'll tell you what, it is a very pretty, it's a pretty fetch looking fucking bug. I highly recommend it. Just look like Beyonce bug named after or whatever. Okay.
Do a Google.
So we're not actually a podcast about bugs. I'm really sorry if you are disappointed in this, but we're gonna get back to it. So this podcast is where Alexis and I sit down and we kind of talk through our mental health, honestly.
Journey.
Yeah, I guess so. Kind of like our journey in a way. And if you missed last episode, that's all right. We'll give you a little mini recap simply of like the thing that ties us together. I mean, we've been besties for a long time, since high school, like over 15 years now.
No, it's more than half our lives.
Let's go.
Put it that way.
Let's
half
go.
our lives,
which is a long life.
Felt like it.
It's felt like
not supposed to feel this long.
It's the half life of it all.
Early. But
so we got to do another 32 of these. Oh my God. Which is why we're talking about this
goodness,
stuff.
though, because we're unlocking. There's so much to implement.
So much. And as you continue on this like journey of becoming an adult in this world, especially if you do have neurodivergencies, the more you uncover, usually the more there is to uncover. And then suddenly you're like, I think I'm at like, I'm figuring it out. I think I kind of have a good grasp on it. And then your brain's like, fucking psych, you got another goddamn neurodivergency. Bam, right in your face. And then you go, holy shit. And then you start thinking about that one.
Oh.
And then the more you start thinking about that one, the more new things start coming up. And you're like,
the other things just go like this. They're not gone.
You're right. They just kind of say,
here.
They're like,
they're waiting their turn.
They're
good
waiting
now.
in
a little line.
Yeah, they're like, we've done enough. We've done enough. You know what, ADHD, tap in.
They're
tap
on
in.
rotation.
It does feel like that.
It does
a lot
feel
of the
like
time.
that.
But when something happens and you find another little treasure chest tucked away in a little crevice that you didn't necessarily know might have been there, it's quite something. So I think I can actively say I'm very happy to be doing this and like having these conversations with you, because I do think it really is going hand in hand with our personal healing journeys, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it's been pretty amazing to get to share that. That's also a good recap of our first episode. It's just like, we have had each other and been very fortunate to have found someone very early with just finding outlets and masking a certain way. And we could very quietly and understandingly support that and
That's true.
evolve that way.
It wasn't even like a total like awareness as it was like find somebody that you like that actively helps regulate
It was complimentary.
Yes, complimentary stimming.
Very naturally complimentary. And just like
Regulation.
correctly stimming and like rewarded by that.
Yes, and thank God.
Oh yeah.
Thank Goddess, like actively sit back and say, thank Goddess. But
we've been able to unpack it together.
Yes.
And that's
at
really
different
a
parts
huge
of our life.
inspo for unpacking it outwardly. Because we're just at the tip of the iceberg. And we know that.
And it's one of those things where it's like, if we're just at the tip of the iceberg and it's already been like as intense as it has been.
Oh yeah.
You're like, I wonder what else could be in here. And I think it's a good time for us to say, why don't we just open this conversation up?
Yeah.
For anybody who might be interested in hearing it. Because I don't think, we talked about this last time, but I don't think there's a lot of outward like representation of women with neurodivergencies, like actively sitting down and having a very frank conversation. Like I know we are like together. Like there are, communities and we're coming together, but I think more people deserve to hear
that
about
outreach.
it. Yeah. Yeah. And also, one of the reasons we decided to do, or the namesake of this show, Unmask, well, it's about like unmasking your neurodivergent, like little bit of a wall, or just like a mask, honestly.
It's your little
the part
mask.
you're
It's
playing.
who you've created to survive.
Right.
And then also trying to say hello to all the things that maybe didn't get nurtured through that. And that's fun times.
And figuring out where does your actual authentic self align with maybe this mask that you created? And then that unpacking.
It does align. It can be
it
abstract.
Does. Yes.
I would argue.
Honestly, that's a good way to put it, because I could sit here now and kind of look back and say a lot of my experiences felt like they were being observed from like
the amount of disassociation where you're like, I'm not supposed to have the memory from over there.
No, but then you're watching like a scene. It's you're watching a scene, but the point of view is you. So you're like watching a movie of you watching the experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is a very interesting thing to when you start to understand that that's like, it's abstract.
You were not in your body.
I'm not here. I'm somewhere up here.
Dropped in.
Yeah, and that's not a actual like real place. It's a place that we've made up.
Well, it was a place we could autopilot from, though. Like we were functional.
Feel safe.
We were functional, but we were not accessible. That's, I think, really.
That's a good way to put that.
Abstract, functional, accessible. My hot words of tonight.
Everybody needs them. Let's go. We can keep figuring out those, but
it does. It feels like.
Accessible is a really good word. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that is how I'm definitely starting to feel. I'm starting to understand what is and is not accessible to me just on like this journey. And it is very interesting to say like, what has even like been inaccessible for me? Like I can't even access these things. So, so we're like, we're getting into it. And so another thing, we'll get back to like what we're doing. Another thing is we both share a very specific experience, which is being child actors, child performers. And on the outside, I think it can look very glamorous, as we chatted about. Like there's something very enticing about the idea of like being in Hollywood or being in these shows or like on stage and like the glitz and the glam of it. And it's very exciting.
That also it's so double-edged. I know get this, and I hope I can phrase it right, but it's like very flattering when people have a very positive reaction to that information about us. Like the little performer is still like, yes. And it is. It's like this glamorous, or like people are always like, of course I see it. And like, it's like this bittersweet, like, ooh.
You're like, thank you.
Yeah, that is so much of who I am, no matter what. And a little bit of me loves that, especially because we're not doing it.
And we're also Leo rising.
But also, could we do it right now? Absolutely not.
Oh.
We know that. So it's just so all over it's so nuanced. There's so many sides to it. But I don't know. I feel like that's such a specific experience too, to be like, I can validate that it is kind of fun and cool.
Man, it's like there's something about it that is very like the dark and like kind of like sexy kind of gray area energy is very enticing. Do you know what I mean? Because like even in, I think of like just being in the theater or just like doing it, just knowing that It can be very gray. Well, because I mean, kind of, I think what we were going to talk about today, which I think is kind of leads into this.
Get into it.
Like the idea of respect and what is and isn't like given to you when you are part of that industry. And I think kind of like the gray smoky area feels kind of like a part of that because it does feel like a dance. So I can understand why it's enticing because it feels very like, ooh,
Well, there's something about something that is so fragile as an industry and like such a risk. It's like, oh, you must be.
Yes.
Like you must be this to be doing this.
Yes.
Like, I don't know. There's something about like the mystery that comes with sustaining in that space.
That's true.
And then other people find it very mysterious because we do kind of shapeshift for a living.
True.
We forget that. True. Like, it's like, oh, I can do one show and you're going to get this from me. I'm going to do another one. It's going to be.
Yeah. Like, probably very, I mean, hopefully different.
As if we're ever used for things like in an array either. Like, we have our type. We're doing the same thing most of the time.
We got our type and that's it,
not
baby.
Our fault.
That's not our fault.
We'll get into that
back
at
into
some
respect.
Point, too.
But one more thing I want to say, like, when you talk to people about your experience, like, because there is like that sounds really glamorous, interesting. It is also really hard to like sit back and you have to do kind of this moment. You have to take a bit and be like, okay, how much am I going to express? Like, how much am I actually going to say about my experience? Like, is it going to be uncomfortable in this moment? Is it going to be like, is it going to break the fourth wall or all that jazz and
People
whatnot?
have big feelings.
They
It's like
do.
Usually positive. Sometimes they're not. It's not positive.
Especially
sometimes
if you're
they
like,
get sus.
Especially like sometimes if, they're like, oh, that's cool. And you're like, yeah, like it actually was it's been very shaping and it's actually a really hard industry. And it's actually been very like toxic and traumatic. Like people aren't always ready to hear that about something that they have a very specific idea of. So you kind of have to also decide like, how much do I share? And because not a lot of people, I think it's a very small group of people in regards to like the grand scheme of things that have had that experience as well.
Yeah.
So it is kind of like you're private about certain parts of your life that maybe you talk about with people who might get it more, but it is really hard to explain.
I think it also is what we talked about unpacking with, it's the voice in it and they like editing things so early to please the room and please the person and get the job or make everyone happy. I think it's just that the filter is activated too, especially on this topic because we had to be filtered.
You're right.
Through everything.
No,
Every moment was an audition. You wake up, you walk. If you're on the street and someone sees you, they might not like your behavior outside of the audition room.
And if they see you like in an audition room and they're like, I recognize that person, they'll be like, absolutely not. And then they can turn to the person next to them and be like, this person's this kind of person, which is a very interesting dynamic because it kind of creates like it's like the banana phone, a game of telephone in a way. But also like what you're saying, and like everything's on audition. Even if you're like going to an audition, who you check in with. It's important. Like you have to be nice to them. You have to be performing.
I was so stressed. I was in fight or flight, literally turning the corner and like trying to park. And I'm like 8 because I was just like, the heat is on in Saigon. The pressure is. Oh my God. The girls are hotter than hell. Like, I read that. You know what's funny? Is I read that like on an old Facebook post. I said that like 10, 15. Talk about inner child work. Like 15 years ago. Probably right around that time. Like, I was like, that was so funny. Why don't you use your MT humor anymore? Because trauma.
Because trauma. And also like when you actually sometimes think about life is hard. Life's an elephant. And we're all just trying to get through it. But...
through the elephant.
I'm so sorry. I just dropped some like when we're talking about theater, that's some lore of a little inside joke that I had with Peter, who played Wilbur, my father, in Hairspray. So gotcha. It's just something that I always say, and I forget that, it's not, it makes no sense.
Oh, I was just, I'm like, it could be very poetic. That's why I ask questions. I just don't get it.
It just came from a misslip of, I have a hard time saying words sometimes. And I actually said time is an elephant instead of irrelevant.
I love
and it took off. And you know what? It kind of is. It's the elephant in the room sometimes, bro. Whoa. We got there.
Dropping knowledge.
So.
It is poetic.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got the abstract.
I knew it.
An abstract
I
idea.
needed just a talk back with the artist about that. We had to unpack it.
It's going to be in about 30 minutes. We're going to have a talk back with the artist. So if you have any questions, just think about it and just raise your hands accordingly, and we'll try to get to everybody. And then like 2 people show up.
I mean, we had some cool private talkbacks in high school. We went and saw all the shows.
That's true.
It was cool.
That was cool. You're right. Let's go. Shout out LVA for giving us
had connection.
some interesting opportunities.
Yeah.
Talking about
anyway,
LVA.
Let's
Let's get back kind of into maybe the theme that we are talking about, which is like the concept of respect. And
self-respect.
And yes, self-respect, respect from other people, and like how that shows up within the world we came from, and how that has actively affected the rest of our lives.
Yes.
So walk us through, like, I would love for you to walk us through like what it's like to do an audition, like when you're in the room, you know what I mean? Because like this is where a big moment of like the respect energy kind of comes in.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. So you walk in trying to give your best. Here's the thing. I have to immediately go for the hardest audition, which is when you have an accompanist and you have to sing something. So you have to like razzle dazzle, but you're also like, I don't fucking know how this is gonna go.
You gotta walk all the way over to the stinking
You gotta go
pianist,
talk to this person.
And you gotta put up and you'd be like, so it starts here,
yeah,
and it goes to here, and it's kind of like,
and you're like trying to like not be offensive or in their face, but you're also like trying to set a tempo.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's a fine dance too.
Oh,
because
it's so easy to offend.
You can
an accompanist.
It is so easy to offend, and to be fair, like they have incredible knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
They're so skilled, and I can understand how it might feel a little, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like not like it might feel a little insensitive or like be like, you know, you don't know how this goes, but it's like that's not the case. But nonetheless, that is the energy that is given off, and when you're like, so you're like, I have to impress the accompanist as well.
No,
like, they're another person you have to impress.
That's the person I'm always been most afraid of.
They can
I'm
make
so
or break
scared.
the audition.
No,
honestly.
and then sometimes it's you just don't know. Like we tried to be smart. We were we had guidance. Like you know,
trained.
I'm hoping it's not like a nightmare piece for them or whatever. But sometimes things just don't go well. Sometimes it comes out and you're like, I've never heard this song in my life, and you're like, this is gonna be
you're like,
so interesting.
Like I'm actually. What show is this?
I'm gonna try to sell it, but I have no idea what you're playing. It's great. But I think it happens to everybody. So that is like, you know, I feel like acting auditions are maybe a little easier because you don't have that like middleman before you can get to the table.
And these people are watching you while you
they
talk
watch
to them.
you
They're
squirm in the corner the whole time, and or they have like really personal conversations, like you're not there,
dude,
and then like having to like announce yourself again,
dude,
and
like
go up to a little tape mark,
like while they're talking to you. Sometimes they don't.
Tape mark. Let's go.
No, but it's so true. And also, sometimes they don't even stop talking.
No.
When you get to like the X that you're supposed to stand on. So you're like, you have to figure out, do you wait for them to stop? Or are you bold and try to get their attention?
They want you to interrupt them.
Yes, they want you to.
Mind control issue. They are like, does she have it in her? And they don't even know they want that. Like they are distracted, but then when you interrupt them, they're like, correct. She's hungry. She's got the
She
thirst.
gets it. She's willing to put her life on the line.
Hungry tick.
Hungry tick. You're sucking all the blood. You're so full. You're a tick. Rip Mr. Edwards.
Takes us back again. We talked about him in both episodes.
Watch him show up every episode.
Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd. Honestly, great production.
It was so good.
I can actually say it was.
He
really
coached
fun.
us to be, you're a tick and you're bloodthirsty.
Yeah, when he was trying to give us notes, and I'll tell you what, it worked.
It did work.
That's when the show came together.
It did work.
Yeah.
I hate that it worked actually because it was insane.
Yeah. But the audition room.
Yes.
So
that's how it feels.
Yeah, and then you start your audition, and who knows, maybe you get to do your entire song. Maybe they cut you
Most
off
of the
halfway
time they're
through.
like, we're good.
Yeah, and they'll be like, great, thanks, we've heard enough, and then you leave. Sometimes in like, especially in the film world, you might not even open your mouth, and they're like, actually, like, no, we're gonna pass
looked at you
because it's literally what you look like.
Oh yeah.
And
what about the international commercials as children? Because I know we both did these.
Yes.
I would like go to an alleyway and get a Polaroid taken, and then I'd have to wait if I made the cut from my Polaroid. And we drove from Vegas to LA to do that. And then sometimes, not usually,
sometimes
I got to stay and talk. And I would get like 3 lines out, and they'd be like, you're great. Thank you so much. And we never heard from them again.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's so true. And then when you're young, and that's kind of hard to sit in too. And also you're taught at a pretty young age that rejection is rejection is a part of life.
It is huge
It's
part of
important
life.
to like know that, and that's a really good lesson.
I'd say 80% of life is rejection,
Yeah.
especially when that's all you're doing.
Especially, but I do appreciate like that life skill that I do think it gave me was the ability to accept rejection simply because of how much you have to deal with. But also, it did also like teach you that it's something that is easy to carry into like all parts of your life, and in a lot of those places it shouldn't be like that. Like you shouldn't be having to like try to get that out of, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like I'm one of 1,000 girls
Yeah.
in this Starbucks and I'm ordering this drink, and if I don't book this room, like it doesn't matter who you're talking to or what you're doing.
No.
It's like you have to pick me. Like it really is that desperate, and they're like, you have to be desperate. Like there were so many
hungry.
incredible words used, because it's like there'll always be someone more driven than you, even if you're more talented, and you're just like, whoa, I'm 8.
Yeah. Stop talking to me like that. I'm really sorry I have to interrupt you. Casper, you better get your tuchus down,
Not
sir.
him on the counter.
No, he's eating. There's like oil and butter and stuff in that pan, and garlic.
He
Get
knows
down.
what's good.
Anyway, sorry. I'm so sorry, but I was like, he can't be
He
eating
knows what's
oil.
good. He was just here being
Gets
so
it.
cute.
I know, and he left to go be an asshole. Anyway, no, but
lick
you're
the
like,
butter.
get back to. I'm 8. I'm sorry.
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry. That's my autobiography someday.
I'm 8. I'm sorry.
That's a really good one.
I'm sorry. I was happy. I'm sorry. Yeah, but so I think, if you think of like auditions, a lot of like that's very much how a lot of them are, very standard. And when I think of like respect as a theme, this industry is one of those where the opposite of what I think should happen happens. In life, I think like everybody deserves your respect until they give you a reason not to.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And in this world, you have to prove why you deserve people's respect.
Yeah, it's
And
not a given. There's no
no.
mutual respect. Is
None.
certainly not on
None.
the table.
And like the power that the people behind the table have, or that they want to make you feel like they have, which is like, it is made up power. Obviously they do, in the sense of like they are the ones casting the show or whatever. Like, yes, that is power in that moment, but the energy that it makes you like instill is this idea of like, this is life or death. Especially when you have
Feels
been in
that
those states
way.
for a long time. Yeah. Because you're like, you do have the power over my career. Maybe. If something happens and you are so offended, like,
You'll spread the
yeah,
gospel.
it'll spread. And that
Yep.
stuff, like, people are loyal in the theater community, which is, can be
We
a
are
good,
loyal. I mean,
it can be a good trait, but also, I think sometimes, I don't think people are necessarily loyal for the right reasons.
oh God, no.
Because oftentimes people are loyal for the sake of nepotism and for the
Clout.
sake of, and being able to get jobs, which I also understand and respect, is like, that's a part of the fucking game. And if you want to actually do it, you have to be willing to play that game.
Yep.
And that's something I know that I am not willing to do anymore.
I don't want to. No, it's made us, I think we've always shared that. Like, it gives us that icky pit in our stomach. And I can directly connect that to our neurodivergence, I think.
Yeah.
Because that, like, empathy forward and, like, you know, just the hypersensitivity of it all, to
Yeah.
be like, oh, I don't like that.
No,
and for it to
something
be
is
such a big part of
so-
everything.
Yeah, something that you had to, that was so uncomfortable that you had to actively still put yourself into time and time again, it is exhausting in its own way. And I can tell you, like, even though I wanted to get all the things that I auditioned for, even though, you know, I still knew that like I wanted to do it, auditioning was still like the most exhausting process.
So scary.
Especially emotionally. So scary. Like, you show up and you're like, I'm going to do it, but it's incredibly vulnerable. And also, when you are somebody who is just naturally uncomfortable in big rooms with people, every single person, and like, if you're at a dance call and there's like 40 other people there are 40 people that are immediately in competition with you.
Not a dance call.
Not a dance.
That's the worst one. That's way worse than an accompanist.
Dude,
Is a dance call.
please. I have to tell you, when I moved up here, I started going to the mover calls, because I was like, they started
same.
having mover calls, and I was like,
As an adult, I'm
that's
a
me.
mover. I'm like-
I'm a decent mover. and I can like shake my
Sell
little
it.
ass on the fucking dance floor, maybe let's fucking go. But that's very different than a dance call.
I'm only good if it's a dance call,
Yeah,
which
you
is
can
not.
fuck up tap.
Well, it's been years. So who knows? I could be like, I've
Been
forgotten
25 years,
everything.
maybe.
You don't know.
Honestly, here's the thing. It's like riding a bike, right?
I do
Here's
it in the
thing about
grocery store.
performance.
I
There you
soft
go.
shoe everywhere
There
I go.
you go. See, it's
It
always
never-
with you, no
it
matter
never
what.
leaves you. But yeah, anything and everything else, I'm like hard pass. I remember I like went to a few auditions after being out of the game for a little bit and was like, I went to like cruise ship audition or something. Oh my god, I tried and I just left. I sang and they liked that, and then I learned the combo, and I like thought about it, and I had my like rotation, and I was like, no, I'm not subjecting any of us to this. And it felt so good. It was the first time as an adult I was
Yeah.
like, I have the agency to just leave.
Dude.
It doesn't feel fun.
No.
I don't want to do it.
And that choice is not something that you are taught
Ever.
to ever have. Like, the only answer is you give it your all.
The only answer is, yeah, you stick it out, and then you hope they loved how charming you were through it, and then you hope they cast you anyway. But I'm like, if this is the choreo, it's not gonna work out.
Dude, and I think bring it back to like the respect, like that shows more self-respect in those moments.
It had to be learned.
Yeah, which is exactly, it had to be something learned, because I don't think the industry itself, it definitely doesn't teach you to have self-respect for yourself, because you're constantly trying to sell yourself
Oh my god.
to people.
Oh, I had a fun. Sorry, this
Please.
is like random to interject with, but I think it is
Please.
telling of the whole theme, which is my first audition, like big, like for Nickelodeon. I think I was 8 or 9, and we got our notes back, which is like insane to give that like back to a family
Dude.
and to the child.
During
Be
an
like, you
audition,
need
but-
notes. No, not during. We got it like later, so at least it wasn't
so,
like
at the callback.
embarrassing.
Oh, the callback. Right. Yeah.
Embarrassing directly. But it just so there were little lines on here for notes. They wrote across all the lines, big teeth come back when you grow into them. And I wouldn't smile in pictures for years. Like it was
man.
fucked up. But like that's how I was introduced, right?
Right.
Like, and I was like, okay. And it like
Yeah.
really got me once. And then from there on out, you're like,
I have big teeth and I cannot show them because it lost me a job.
you're like, I
Right?
know how to work this.
Yeah.
And then you grow into them, and then
And you-
everything is about the polish. Like
Oh.
it's just but I'm like, okay, that's a great place to be like, so in that room, you realize like I could be picked apart for anything.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough.
No.
And I could do everything right, and still this one thing was all they saw.
Yes.
They wrote it. There was something about writing it
So
across
fucking
like
big.
8 lines.
It
I was like,
seems so
excuse me.
passively aggressive.
I know they really
Especially
had
for
a problem with it.
child. Also, literally being like, that's something that a kid cannot control, and but that's another thing. Like, this industry is very cruel to
know.
like the parts of you that you can't control. Even I think of like something that happens when you are in the theater world in particular, especially musical theater. You have a type. All right, so like you learn about types
Let's get
pretty
into
early
types.
on. And immediately, the first thing that is going to determine your type is what you look like. Like as a femme person.
Also, your general vibe.
General vibe.
People are like, it's giving. And they started doing that when we were very young.
Very
and then as
young.
we evolve, your type changes. It morphs.
Yeah, and then especially when there's something about being told, it's like, okay, this is my type. And then you have this understanding. And now you're like, so the only things that I can do are things that my type does. So you start pigeonholing yourself immediately.
Yeah,
And-
no one's even going to give you audition material that's not your
No,
type.
no.
Because what's the point? You're not
Yeah.
going to win. You're not going to book.
You won't be blessed and booked. You're gonna be out on the streets, I tell you, on the streets.
Waiting tables, I tell you. You're doing that
How
anyway.
many- yeah, how many have I
I
waited?
don't know what I'm talking about. You have to
still-
continue to do that anyway.
It's okay. It's a part of it. Well, it's a part of it. And that
the
comes back to
world.
like all the self-respect of it. Like even all the different like survival
Dude,
jobs that you have to live.
And always service. You and I like very different areas, but like have always been in service because those are the rooms we can book, but those also so quickly become the most oppressive rooms. And you're like, oh God.
Yeah, especially because when it comes to like customer service, there's just an immediate like like blanket this whole like you're in customer service, so you can't say anything against me. Hold on, pause.
I know.
Casper,
I watched
bruh,
him do it.
get down right now.
He's hot on camera.
Do you mind like pretending to stand up over there and like going to get him? Thank you so much.
He really
Oh, well,
doesn't care.
you can scruff him. You can go and scruff him as he is.
He's back.
Little shit weed.
Butthead.
He's like, they were getting into it. I need to interrupt.
This is about me.
Man, talk about divas. Am I right?
He is the star.
I don't even know what we were talking about. The booking rooms being the type. So yeah.
Oh yes. Yes.
So you get like
Type.
pushed into this little
Pigeonholed.
type and pigeonholed. And then suddenly you're like 14 and you're like, so my type is a 45-year-old woman who has been working in labor forever. Thank you. But like,
Spitfire girl. That's the best example.
Let's go. When I was
so good.
When I was 17, I put on the performance of my lifetime.
She did, y'all. It was
playing
beautiful.
a 76-year-old woman in the Spitfire Girl. To be fair, that musical
You haven't
is
listened to that?
stunning.
Yeah. It's gorgeous and
It's a
underrated.
dream.
Nobody talks about it.
I know. It's definitely underrated. Honestly, it's a hard show to do. It's a hard show to sing. And also your acting chops have to be like chef's kiss. You know
You're
what
right.
I mean?
It's just hard.
It's just hard. It's just hard.
But it's good.
Casper, he's getting into the light now.
Casper.
Hey, buddy.
He wants the attention
down.
on him. He is in the spotlight.
Do you want scruffing him?
No, I don't mind. Yeah.
Even if he jumps down, do it anyway. Sometimes you have to teach him. Sometimes, there we go. Thank you so much.
Don't do that.
Man, live production, everyone. You never know what you're going to get, but I'm chink. So
It's all good. He has to report to me too. I've known him since he was 3 weeks old.
that's true. So you kind of are like, principal energy coming in here. You know what I mean?
No, he was never. He was an only child. He was a little orphan guy, so he got whatever he wanted. He literally had no discipline. It's my fault. He's like this.
I mean,
And my
I
mom's.
also give him everything
just
he
tweeted
wants.
boy.
He's a very charming cat. Oh, someday we'll show pictures of all of our cats.
We
Someday,
got
don't
some
worry.
good cats.
We got good cats, but bring it back to typecasting.
Bring it back. Bring it back.
But yeah, so when you're young and you have been just like told, so if you want to do this for the rest of your life, these are the things that you're going to be doing, and only these kind of things. So you need to train to be able to do only
This
these
is
things.
who you are, actually.
Yes, and it's depending on what your type is, like it's very well. The expectations are very aggressive, no matter what. Especially like you were an ingenue for a long time. I mean, you could still be one. You'd be an interesting ingenue, if I can say that.
Thank you.
Because like also in the musical theater world, you're kind of taught that an ingenue is like beautiful voice, sweet, innocent. Everyone loves her.
Yeah.
And like that's what you are.
Thanks.
You
But
know?
also typically just like boring. And I'm
Yeah.
always mad about that.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on.
Yeah, the expectations are very, I mean, they're kind of low.
I know.
Low key. Okay. I'm going to drop some
Let's go.
hot take.
Let's go.
I sometimes think that the expectations that are set in a room are not like they're not the kind of expectations that allow for people to be surprised. They're not the kind of expectations where like people are willing to open their mind. Like when people have a very specific idea of like who they want to cast, like what this part looks like, suddenly they're only thinking about that. And it's not often that they're willing to give chances to people who could fucking rock certain roles, and they just don't give them a chance because that's not their type.
They pigeonhole,
pigeonhole
themselves.
you.
I am the production and the creative scope.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we all are like put in these little boxes, and then we're walking around trying to fit in these little slots.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really have to work that way.
No, especially when while you were trying to like train and be the best version of yourself, like as an actor as you can be, you are also trying to learn how to be a fucking human in the world.
There was no time for that.
No, yeah, honestly, for real. Because I can say, as soon as I got into the real world and it was like, figure it out, I was like, I don't have the skills. In the sense of like,
Oh, absolutely.
none. You know, like
None.
there's so many certain things that I'm like, we just been Scrappy Madoo over here. Scrappy Madoo. I keep saying Scrappy Madoo. Let's
like
go.
it. It
Let's go,
sticks
Scrappy
now.
Madoo. Thank you very much. But you know,
We'll make merch.
Scrappy Madoo.
I like it.
Honestly, I'd love to design it.
True.
But yeah, Scrappy Madoo's over here. But which is I'm grateful for, which is something that I think the industry did help us understand, because there is something about the performance industry. You will do, it's like when you're taught to do anything you can to book the role, it's like you're like, sure, okay, fine, I'm gonna get creative. So you do. And honestly, the ability to like have that creativity to like try new things has definitely helped in real life, because like creative
How we
problem solving,
survive.
yeah, it's all creative problem solving, which I think is what like is performance ultimately.
Improvisation
Life,
in
but you're
daily life.
It's
We're a
improv in
lot.
your actual
It's
life,
easier for us to sell something we know absolutely nothing about very well
dude.
than most people, and I'm very grateful for that. But then it's also exhausting because you're like, I know nothing. I've been talking out of my ass for weeks at this new job, and I still don't know what I do. But sometimes that's the case.
It absolutely is, and but the thing is, you do what you have to, because you have to make money.
It works.
It works, and when you are put into a world that is a lot, okay, something that I have kind of like reflected on in my older age, especially after just having gone through the industry a bit and having like had to exist and like pay bills and find a way to like fit into society just as like a whole, is a lot of like the things that we are being taught by our mentors about like what the industry was like came from, I think, a more dated understanding of the industry, especially because a lot of our mentors were had existed during like the golden era, or like
the
a little
prime.
after the prime of it.
And like mainstream society was like going to this. Like
Yes.
that is not the case, at least in the US. It's a lot better in Europe. I have gathered.
Theater's, like, actually
it's
respected.
It's respected, and it's incorporated into like a more common form of entertainment to attend.
Yeah.
Here it's like not that at all.
No, and what it is it's very the theater world is not safe from capitalism, and because of that, it's a fucking money.
It's funded by it.
Yeah, it's funded by it, and like when you take art and you're like, we need to make the most money versus we need to tell the best story, like a very certain energy comes with that, and very certain expectations come with that. And when like bring it back to respect, like how many times you have to be in a room where you got cast in a show, fuck yeah, we're so grateful to be performing, we love it, but you have to put all of your like anything that doesn't feel comfortable to you, you have to put on the back burner.
Oh my gosh. And people make those rooms, like booking the job is supposed to be the rewarding part. Yes. But then it can be a nightmare. No one talks about like most of the shows you do. There's somebody that's like ruining the party, at least one person.
Dude.
And it's like, I didn't get to choose these people. Like my casting decisions would be much different.
That's also it, where it's like, so this is the group of people that you're going to be spending like in high school, like the next 2 months with, or however long we used to rehearse, but like, or a month, whatever in your production ish. I guess multiple months if you're performing. I'm thinking like rehearsal rooms, but I guess it's also like it's performance and rehearsal. 2 months or so. Okay. Anyway, you're with these people, right? Like we're forced in this room with this people, or not forced. We feel like you're forced.
Well, we've been organized. I think that's fair.
Yes.
We did not choose the concoction of personalities.
Yes.
We have no say.
No, and that is a part of it. Great. But
and strong personalities, boy, oh boy.
Yes, especially in the performance world in general, because we're all, I mean, I'll say it like me. It's like I fell in love with it because I really loved it in the beginning, of course, but I also got a lot of validation through it. Validation that I hadn't necessarily found in my life yet, especially as like a little femme person growing up who, like, as soon as my period hit and I became aware of my body, like, that's when dissociation started so much, because you're immediately like, oh my God, I'm wrong. And especially like for me, I have a lot of doctor trauma because when I was like 9, the BMI changed overnight and I suddenly became obese as a child. And then every doctor's appointment started with, so we need to talk about your weight. You need to lose weight because childhood diabetes.
Absolutely horrifying.
Yeah. So immediately, you're already uncomfortable about that. Then you add hormones and your body changes and you're like, so you're already, especially I think as a femme person, especially a neurodivergent person, you're already like in dissociative land. You're like living in this new narrative for yourself that you are like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. So all these things that feel uncomfortable, it's not important. It's on me to deal with, because I have to make sure everybody else is important with who I am, and everybody else is comfortable with who I am. And I feel like that, the self-respect, like, can be so stripped away because we're not taught. Like, in those moments when you feel the most vulnerable and the most, like, upset with yourself over something that you can't control, like, it's really easy to start beating yourself up over it.
Oh, yeah.
And that definitely bleeds into performance worlds, because if you can't get a note, and you get a note, obviously notes are important, but, like, maybe if you have, like...
There's always a spicy note. There's always a note that you go home and you're like, I don't agree
with that.
I think that was out of line, which is so funny, honestly. I'm like, I could take a lot and I'll take it to my face and in stride, no problem. But am I like, I have notes on your notes? Always.
I have notes on your casting.
I have notes on your how you conduct yourself, actually.
Also that, like,
some of the language,
especially like directors, the people who are in charge of the room sometimes. So another thing that happens, I think, especially in regards to like that kind of power trip, when all these people are so hungry to perform, they'll do anything to impress these people. Like the power trip is very real, or it can be very real. And that is a very uncomfortable place to be, because you're looking to this director who you need to make happy in order to perform, because you don't want to get in trouble. Because if you get in trouble, who fucking knows what they're going to say to you? Like, will it be verbally abusive? Usually. Like
Are we gonna throw a chair today?
Yeah, dude. Are we gonna like fucking get in a kid's face and scream about how like they can't stand in the fucking right position or whatever? And it's like, where's that? The self-respect doesn't.
Tell them
exist
you're gonna
rooms.
replace them.
Literally, be, and it's like, yeah, you're replaceable. There are like hundreds of other people who
they
could
love
fill
to
this
do
job.
that. It's their favorite.
To do that.
Let me check you on the hierarchy in this room. It's a constant narrative, and you're like, I got it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then you have to regulate yourself around maybe cast members who maybe make you uncomfortable, or maybe there are people.
Some just give you the ick. I'm gonna be honest. It doesn't mean they like can do. Again, it's working so intimately with people. And so many different people, and in like weird mixes, and sometimes you just don't mesh. And yeah, you have to ignore your signals, being like, this is not my human that I would choose to be near, actually.
Yeah.
You have no. And then you feel like guilty about it too. Yeah. You're like, I can't have beef because then I can't work.
Yeah, because everybody has to like me in this room. I have to make sure that everybody thinks that I'm really nice, and that I am really reliable, which is, I mean, obviously like things that we want to be. But when you're constantly having to like regulate yourself to be this version of yourself, even if it is like the most uncomfortable thing to do, like that's very damaging to like a growing brain. If we want to get back to like the trauma idea of it.
Well, it's the fight or flight. Like, what am I supposed to do or say as quickly as possible to be correct? Like, what
might be wrong.
Yep. And everyone's gonna love it, and it's gonna be entertaining, and it's gonna be charming.
And I gotta razzle dazzle, baby.
I don't have a choice. And like being upset, or like even that had to be kind of glamorous. Like it was just this navigating of like,
just constant. Yeah, it's the constant show. It's like you're always putting on a show.
There's no private. You're right, and there's no private moments. And I think there's a reason we don't remember. We've been talking a lot about just not remembering certain. We're like, where did that go?
We're like, holy shit!
And what is this? This part of my life was there, and I just don't really think about like everything else overshadowed. And I think it is. It's like the private moments were not what we were taught were value. Like there was no value to them if it was just for us. That's not even a concept that we could grasp.
Yeah, and also like if
I still struggle.
Oh, absolutely. And you can't have a bad day in a rehearsal room either. Like something that is a much more conversation, I think, like especially with our community today, is the idea of like good and bad mental health days. And like sometimes, if you had a really rough day and it has already been really rough on your nervous system, and you have to go into a rehearsal room and you are being pushed to your limits because your nervous system's off and you can't focus, you're missing cues, you're missing your steps, all this jazz. And then in turn, you get berated, or it's like you get in trouble. And also it's like there's no space for it. They don't hold space for the fact that some things
We're human.
are hard. Yeah. And like you can't take a mental health day. in the performance world.
Well, time off it's also fleeting. That's also another
true.
fun thing. It's like, here's commit to this for 4 months and then you're done. We're done with you. But also give us your whole life. No days off. You're going to work insane hours.
Yeah.
This is going to become your identity. And then we're going to drop you like flies.
Yeah.
Like it's
And then
just
you're done.
how it works.
Yeah. And
It's hilarious. I'm sorry. As a construct,
No.
you're like, oh, but it's true.
It is. It makes me think of, so last year there was, I had a moment where I got an audition for a show up here, which is Legally Blonde, the musical. I'm like, cool, which is fun. And I was like really grateful because it was a professional production. But in the email, it was for the ensemble, the audition. I'm like, cool. And then they give you like an email about like all the dates and all this. And then they had like a pay bracket. And it was really interesting because before like they started listing the pays, there was a like bold italicized red statement that said, all rates are non-negotiable. And I went down and I looked at what the ensemble rate was going to be. And it was less than minimum wage when I like did the math about like how much time you would put into it, how many days a week that you'd be working, how many hours. And I just had that moment where I was like, so this is non-negotiable, one. So they're immediately telling me that this is my worth. If, which is like,
it is what it is, flat rate, baby.
It is like accept it or don't, which is like fair. And, because there are other people that will accept it. Great.
Oh, hundreds of them. We're told every day.
Every day. And also I'm like, you're right. So many people want this job. And because of it, they are willing to work really hard for barely nothing.
Yep.
And like you were saying, 4 months of your life, they ask like everything has to be put on hold. You have a job, day job, you can't go to your day job anymore, so you have to quit your day job, and then you put your life on hold. You do
lose
these
everything.
things, you lose everything. You lose your time, you lose your social life. Like truly, it is a lifestyle choice, which is something that is also like a concept that you're not taught because it's like it's your life.
It's an expectation.
Yes.
I don't think we knew there was an option against it until we aged and life happened and things fell into place.
Yeah.
And we were like, actually, to be an authentic person, I can't just do this all the time and like not have anything else. Like, and then we both started to have these aha moments of like, actually, I'm really interested in this. Actually, I'm really good at this.
Oh,
and we never had any space for it.
yeah, right. And like,
crazy.
especially, it's crazy. It really is because, when you have those moments in your life and you start realizing this, you kind of have an identity crisis.
Multiple.
Yeah, like every day, because you're like, oh my God, like I was doing something that, it actually felt really uncomfortable to do and really bad to do, but this is who I define myself by. And when you have to start, when like the crack starts, like one little crack, it's like the beginning of the flood. It really does, because suddenly you're like, I actually really like doing that thing. Oh, I could do that thing and be happy in my life. That's been a big moment for me. But
And just like general like downtime. I think that was I still
shook.
like it is both our favorite things and still a very difficult thing, I would argue, at this point in our lives, because it simply did not exist
No.
for at least 20 years straight. Well,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think honestly.
Probably.
Easily.
Yeah. Well, especially if you include like going to high school
I
in
guess
the way that we did.
let's
it
say
was
15,
consistent.
15 years straight.
Still a fuck a ton of long time, especially when like what you're doing is physically exhausting, mentally and emotionally exhausting. I think that's also something that we were not taught to give emotional like exhaustion the time of day. Mental health was not a conversation that we were having in any of these rooms or at home. I mean, your home is very different.
Lucky, and my parents like
I'm
were
grateful
very
for.
funny because they would do like crash course self-care. Like I just simply didn't have the time, but they were also like a little nervous. They were like, she's gonna break. She's on the edge. We better like. So they put some effort in to make sure that I had rest. But I think I was really adverse to rest. Like I did not like that early on, and then like.
If you rest,
I guess resting is all I balance. Like I made it so I only had time to rest when I had to for so long.
Absolutely. And downtime, like having free time, there's something about, especially when you come from like the background that we did, even just like as femme people in our world, like free time needs to be filled. Like that is like the narrative that exists.
It's like currency. I mean,
Yes.
and we feel guilty if we hold on to it.
Yeah, and the guilt like leads to the shame, and then suddenly you feel shame when you're like,
embarrassing.
yeah, when you're like, actually, I don't want to do anything, and then it's like, oh, okay, because it's like you're being really unproductive, or you're being really boring, or whatever, which is obviously a very false narrative as we're learning.
Oh my gosh, now we know. We're like, we have to fill our cup. Everything else is so much more so much more fun, and we can be so much more present.
Yeah.
If we take that time to be like, actually, and like,
Dude,
I think it's equal parts like sitting in the uncomfy and moving through that solo when you really, really don't want to do it alone. That's been a big reoccurring thing.
Especially when you're in the shits of it.
Yeah, and then just full like inner child gremlin mode has to be done solo. Like
it
pretty
has to be
frequently,
done.
especially at this point when we're trying to like relearn or learn in general how to play, because we, in a way that's not like curated for us.
Dude,
Not
I
structured.
was just thinking about this today, because that's been a lot of the lessons that I'm kind of getting from the Sweet Universe right now is getting back to play. And something that I'm kind of understanding and coming to terms with is the idea of like what I thought was really fun and the kind of play that I love doing. It translated immediately into the theater world, into the performance world, because you're playing pretend. And like, obviously that's like the tets, and you're like
dressing up.
and you're using your imagination to create this character and this story. It's amazing. But when it becomes your life, and when it becomes your career, and when it becomes the only thing that you identify yourself by, or you feel safe to identify yourself by, like, it loses what like play is supposed to be.
The joy's gone.
The joy is gone.
That's been
And you know, something that I've been moving through as well is, I think you also experienced this, was I actively lost my joy of singing.
Oh, years I couldn't access. Yeah, how sad, right?
Like, and access it.
It was
You're talking about, like,
a
being able to
wound
access
where I was
things.
like, actually, I can't. It's too hard.
It's like, and
too
it's
hard.
literally too raw, because you're like, it hits a part of my life that I cannot face. And
So hard.
you know, it's so hard, especially when it is who the world sees you as, and who these what the expectations are, and also to like bring it back to that idea of respect. It feels like, when it comes to like self-respect, a very disrespectful thing to do to yourself, to give all of your joy away.
That's a beautiful way to put it. You funneled
You
it
know?
out because
Yeah.
I was hot off the presses, and that's what you had to do. But
Yeah.
you do run out.
You do.
I think we've learned that on a lot of fronts. You just run out.
You run out.
We can't be so willy-nilly with these resources.
No. And when you have to come back to now, like as we are talking, like in doing our inner child work and healing our inner teen, the number one thing that you have to figure out how to get back in touch with is playing. And like your ability to play and find joy in those
And it
simple
bubbles
things.
up in the craziest little things.
Craziest way. And when you have to face that like reality, it's very it can be really humbling.
Absolutely.
And also enraging. You know?
Feel robbed.
Yeah, there is that feeling of a wrong has been done. And I have definitely spent plenty of a lot of time in the last chunk of years, especially since I was doing it professionally, just being bitter that it was being taken from me, and that it felt like work, and that it felt like something I didn't look forward to doing.
Well, it felt like politics only too, right? I would imagine that it gets to that point where you're like, nothing I do or like or produce, and it's hard to age within it.
Oh.
And once I would argue it's like when our brains stopped cooking, like mid-20s. I think in general, like an ego and everything, it's like, actually I can start to recognize, despite the all the doubt, obviously, and the self-sabotage that is gonna happen. But it's like, oh no, actually, I believe in what I'm producing. I know I actually can more confidently be like, I did really well at this, and this should have reflected this. And it gets really hard to accept when people have other feelings, or it feels very scripted and it doesn't feel honest. And then it's just it starts to create new wounds where it's like, okay, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. I even am starting to see that I'm good at what I'm doing, and that's not how I'm being received or
No.
spoken to. Is that ever even going to be possible?
Exactly. Oh, isn't that interesting though? Like when you finally start clocking the fact that you deserve self-respect, and when you start noticing and like recognizing that, you will start seeing how so many parts of your life do not treat you with the kind of respect that you deserve or need. And that's like a big unpacking. And I definitely thinking about like being in rooms like when you kind of start understanding your worth. So okay, I'm gonna tell a little story, especially because we're kind of it really goes along with all this. But when COVID hit in 2020, I was in the middle of rehearsing for a new show that was going to open at Village called Hansel and Gretel and Heidi and Gunther. Ripped that show. I'm so upset that it didn't get to be seen. But you know, maybe someday. But that's like that's the biggest loss of that moment. But so we were doing that. We got shut down on opening night, and my server job went away, and we all quarantined. Right? We all went on lockdown, and suddenly, like, I had so much free time that I did not have before because my entire day would be booked. I would be gone like all day, and then you come home at like 8 p.m., like 10 p.m. or whatever, and then you do it again. And because it was like, this is temporary, it was a lot easier for me to sit back and be like, I'm just gonna do what I want then. And then I found a routine. I started doing yoga. I started meditating. I was able to cook all my meals. I was able to take care of a house, do puzzles, all that. We were all in that zone. And it felt really good. And I remember I got a little bored through it. Not bored, but I was like, I really want to like just kind of get out in the sense of I want to feel a little more purpose. And I also was going to need to make money. So I got a job, but I got a job like as a fruit packer, and I was packing fruit boxes, and I fucking loved it. And then I started work sharing on farms. And that led me to be a part of the Snoqualmie Valley Farmers Cooperative that I eventually managed, which is insane to think about.
You killed it.
Talk about razzle-dazzling our way into places.
She climbed.
I climbed that ladder full of carrots. But it was just so interesting to be suddenly finding a world where I felt that I liked. And I felt welcomed. And I felt authentic in a way that I hadn't before. And that was a lot of just like, oh my gosh, like for stopping that, like this other part of my life made me realize what I was missing in many ways. Mm-hmm. And then I remember I left that job because the theater industry was starting to open up and it wasn't going to be conducive. It was just like heavy labor job. And I was like, I got to get back to the theater and all that jazz. And so I went back to my serving job on the Microsoft campus. Gosh dang campus. Sorry. I immediately
know
have
it's
spicy
still
feelings. It's okay.
Dark.
It's still dark, but that's okay. And we'll get into it at some point.
Yeah.
But, and then I remember doing a show, my first show after COVID, which was The Pirates and Penzance, and which is Gilbert and Sullivan, which is oldie. It's really silly. It's a little problematic, but it's really silly. But I do remember the director like came to me and was like, I'd love for you to be in the show. These are the roles. I'd love for you to audition. I was like, amazing, thank you. And he pitched the show to me. And Pirates of Penzance is a very like dated show. There's a lot of sexism. There's a lot of like racism exists in those shows. There's a lot of just like problematic things. And especially through COVID, and as we started watching so many like big deconstructions happen, and we started really recognizing a lot of like the big issues in our world, I had made the decision. I was like, when I go back, I want to make sure I want to do things with integrity because we have like shit to talk about.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, fine. But I was like, it'd be fun to do Pirates and Penzance. It'd be nice to do Gilbert Sullivan. It's fun. And he pitched it to be like, he's like, I'm going to make it really progressive. We're going to give like the women power and we're going to do all these things. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm really excited. That sounds great. So I accepted it. And granted, like rehearsing during COVID was very unique because like, you had to be masked if you weren't like performing or like rehearsing and all this. So it was like awkward. But I remember like I asked so many times if we could schedule an opportunity to do table work because table work is really important to me because I'm like, I got to figure out my character and I want to figure out relationships and all that jazz with everybody. And it just was never available and never met. And I, questions and like, or just like different ideas or like questions I'd have in the room felt very like ignored. And suddenly I was realizing that, oh, there was actually nothing was really that had been pitched to me was happening. And it like shook me in the sense where I was like, dude, I was like, this feels very like, I was like, this feels a little disrespectful.
You were having a bad time.
I was like, it was fine, but like it was not enjoyable. But I also know that I'm sure it wasn't as enjoyable because I had suddenly been able to have a lot of different experiences that were incredibly fulfilling. So I was suddenly looking at it with a different lens. So it was just very interesting to recognize that I felt so much more comfortable and so much more in my own skin and making my own choices and my authenticity when I had the opportunity to put that performer part of me on hold and legitimately like explore other parts of who I was, which is incredible. But when your entire identity is tied to this performative part of you, like that's existential
Who
crisis.
am I? Yeah.
Who am
2,
I?
4, 6. Oh. One.
Iconic. So I just kind of like, I just wanted to tell a story to bring it back to the fact that like you don't understand how much you are giving over to people, to energies, to jobs. Like, and this goes for like any job, honestly.
So we've learned.
So we've learned that you give so much energy over and you give them control and you give them your like self-respect in a way. And suddenly it's gone and you don't have any for yourself. So like that's definitely where I think burnout can, like why burnout happens, because you give everything away that you have until you don't have any for yourself. And
and we could easily like exist in structures together where someone doesn't have to check everything at the door, right?
Yes.
Like we don't have to uphold that dynamic.
No.
It's very much a choice.
Yes.
And that is what is so hard.
Yeah. Yep. It goes back to like when the people talk about it as like the shattering of the matrix, like when you finally like step outside of it. And in this like moment, I'm talking about like our structures as a society and the structure that we were put into and told like operated a certain way. And then like I think a lot of millennials, we got into this world, the American capitalist world, and we recognized that. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, you see the underbelly of the beast. Like I think a lot of us have.
So it's just all power dynamics and bullies. Everybody's bullying everyone.
Everybody. But you know
and
what?
then everyone's pretending not to cry about it in the bathroom.
Yes. Like you know what? It sounds a lot like a theater room. Honestly, you go back to like bullies. How many like.
That's why we're so triggered right now. We're like, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. But
we peeled back a layer and it's the same.
Yeah, for real. But also sometimes it's even in a more intense way because it's with the performance job. If you needed to, you could leave. Go get your other job. The odds are you're not being paid a lot anyway.
Oh no.
You know what I mean? So like the stakes are like more about your personal stakes in it versus like the actual life or death stakes, even when we feel like they are life or death stakes.
Yes.
But then when you get into the real world and you live in a place where you literally have to pay to live, make a living. And if you don't make money, you can't feed yourself, and you can't house yourself. And if you happen to be unhoused, you can get arrested. And if you get arrested, you get put in jail. And when you get put in jail, free labor for these. Okay.
Yeah, it's true though.
Yeah. But the stakes are high because the structures that are in place make them very high. And they've put like an entire population of people in fight or flight, like inadvertently. But that is what's happening when people are so like scarcity mindset.
Such a large scale.
Yeah. It's like so understandable because of the fact that we're forced to exist in this. So I think there's something about just realizing that it's not just the it wasn't the theater world.
It's a nightmare in a way, but it's also
yeah.
But of course, this is also like very neurodivergent of us. It's psychology. It's how we understand people, and like seeing people act in the wild is all we wanted to isolate as little actors. That's telling stories and playing. And now we're very fascinated, but hyper aware.
Yes.
Where a lot of people don't, because we were literally trained to always be too aware of ourselves and what we were acclimating to and the energy we were giving off.
And to
so
be an
we're
observer.
receiving a lot of it. And we're like already hypersensitive people without that layer. And I just feel like a lot of people, are like buckling under the same pressures, but like don't have any of the training or the language to like mask through it. And so we're seeing a lot of unraveling in the wild.
Especially right now.
Holy smokes.
Which is why it's like, it is a little easier to just like give in to whatever's happening. Cause I'm like, everybody else is feeling it too. It's not just me anymore. Or, you know, my group of people that are like, recognizing that things are fucked or are a certain way. So that is nice, at least in terms of like, we're all in this together. You know what I mean? But it is just to go from living in your adolescence to figuring out social situations, which usually come with a lot of different dynamics, and bullying and all that also comes from it. And you know, people can be doing bullying inadvertently. You know, we're also learning about who we are, and we're also adopting all these different narratives that like are not ours because we're trying to navigate this world that we do not know how to navigate in because we are neurodivergent and have been for quite some time, and we've been masking for quite some time. But I think when you go through that, and then you go through the school, and then you get put into a career where that never ends.
And every little ecosystem is so uncomfortable or like has so many problems. And you're like, what?
Like, why? I'm like, are we not adults? Like, did we?
No one can self-regulate. Take it back to FB1.
That's what it is.
Nobody self-regulates.
Nobody. It's because we're not taught how to self-regulate. Like, that's something that, like, when you talk about reparenting yourself, which is something that you definitely do when you're doing therapy and you're going through all the inner child work, like, that is when you teach yourself how to self-regulate.
Yeah, and guess what? Self-regulating is inherently a somatic practice. So it ties back into all the things you have to do, the work that you have to do to, like, find that mind-body connection and get to know it better so that you can navigate in the world more kindly because you know how to freaking regulate yourself.
And you're aware of yourself in the world in the sense of... if you can be in your body in the world and you are regulating yourself, it's much easier to like see people for who they are and to just like kind of see like what's happening. And usually if somebody is mad, like they're projecting, right? Like projection happens all the time.
Mirrors.
All the time. And so when you can self-regulate, or at least you notice it, you can pinpoint this, and it's a lot easier to have grace. But if you have no idea how to do that, and if you're in dissociation land, which a lot of people are, like a lot more than I think we even really understand.
Oh, yeah, their nervous systems, most people's nervous systems are not in better shape than ours are.
No.
Like,
we're just taught
due to the elements, right?
Yes.
And like ours kind of started that way, but we have a lot more tools in our little kit than the other people do. So
yeah. I think, well, it's also because it's been something that has been just prevalent in our lives for a very, very, very long time. So it is more... I find it a little easier to like really accept this unpacking of it because I'm like, oh, this makes sense for a lot of different parts of my life, right? So it's a little easier to do. But no, when people can't regulate themselves right now because we don't know how to, and also everyone's under so much stress.
Yep.
So it makes even just like simply going to work
exhausting. I'm so tired. Just like having to like exist in the world and be perceived, which in itself is a performance. When you are neurodivergent and you do not want to be doing the thing. Most people don't want to be. No. Like when you're a good performer, when you're raised to be a little performer. Like, don't go.
Yeah, you're performing in every place of your life.
You're going to throw up. You can't go.
That's what my body does. She
said, literally, who knows?
Who knows, man?
You're going to faint. We're going to do anything we can to keep you from the thing you have to do to survive.
To survive.
Okay, and thank you.
It. Yeah, I mean, it's like, thank you for like letting me get to this point of like wanting to survive. I think that's like...
That's a good thing.
I
keep that handy.
Yeah, and that's been like one of the biggest... I mean, that was a catalyst for me, like being willing to face my mental health. Because last year when I had a mental health crisis, I was just in the moment. It was when I was helping unionize my last workplace. Really hard. I was being spread really thin. Nobody was respecting my boundaries. Really hard work to do as well. Also, just people pleaser, running on fumes anyway. Cool. Neurodivergent, whole mess of things. But they were they were talking about maybe like me coming on board and like working for the union. Like I was being hunted in that sense. and I was thinking about it, but then I had a really big heart to heart with with my, like the person who I was working with, my rep. And it was like the first time that I actually said out loud, because I was explaining how exhausted I was and how like bad I felt. And it was the first time I like outwardly said, I don't know how I live another like 30 years feeling how I do right now. Like legitimately and meaning it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like there wasn't like the ideation. That was not a part of it, you know, of like that in like the idea of like suicide or anything. But it's just more of this reckoning of like, oh my gosh, I am so not okay that I truly don't know. But within it as well, it unlocked like the want to be okay.
Yeah.
Right.
You're like, where do we go? What do we have to pursue now? Even though it's really hard.
Yeah.
So we can start to get to a better space, because that's always the motivation, which I'm grateful.
Yeah.
We both have access to that pretty readily, and not everyone does. And I hold immense space for that. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about enough.
Yes.
Is how out of control intrusive thoughts and feelings like that can be, and so much more so. Like,
and they can control your whole life. They can control every thought process, every narrative that you are telling yourself, and often they're lies.
Oh yeah, it's just holding space for that always, even though that's not our direct experience. And I'm always like, how did I dodge that one? I really like. Yeah, it's not. It's it's very legitimate, and I'm grateful that our gut reaction is, how do we start to crawl our way up? Yeah. And that's helpful. Yeah. It's that anxious energy. Yeah. We just got to channel it.
Oh, for real. And also, like, luckily, I'm very fortunate. I see myself as a very fortunate person to have, like, a community that, like, actively shows me why it is always worth crawling back out of the hole, right? Because you're like, I want to be here for this. Yeah. I want to be able to be present and live authentically. And tying it back to our, like, kind of theme of respect, like, sometimes you need those moments to show you that, like, you deserve your self-respect.
Yep.
And that's something that, you know, I think I can say for me and probably for you, like, we gave away. In just the sense of,
I didn't want anything to do with it. Honestly, I was like hot potatoing it back if anyone ever tried to give it to me for so long, because it was needed, right? But it was a lot of responsibility when we gave it away. So like, I'm like, I don't know what to do with that.
No, like I haven't been taught to, like.
And then when you get it back, that's when you feel spicy in all these rooms, because you're like, actually, I need to be spoken to better.
Yes, actually, I am uncomfortable in this. Like, actually, I don't agree with what's happening. I don't want to.
I don't think this is logical.
No,
or ethical.
And if you're somebody who has not been that way, and suddenly you are showing up in rooms that way, and people do not know you that way, suddenly,
trouble right here in River City.
The capital T in that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. But, you know, so I think it's just and that just starts creating a lot more drama, in the sense that suddenly you almost, like, people expect you to have, like, something to say about, like, why you're being this way. You know, like, if they don't know this, like, that you to be that way, or like for you to be like speak up about something like that, and suddenly everything unravels, and suddenly.
Well, like, we're not palatable to everyone anymore, right? It's like we were constructed to appeal to an audience, and who we really are is not. Like, I in a good way, mostly, but like, we're acquired taste. Like, it's true. Like, we're very specific human beings, and I think that is very funny in contrast to being anyone's pick our whole lives. Like, we can do both, which can be terrifying.
It's the Gemini in us. No, you're right. I think Zach mentioned it the other day. We've been talking about in general, just like eccentric. Yeah. You think Zach mentioned it at one point, Zach. It's like, you're an eccentric person. Like, you are eccentric people. It's like, I have not clocked myself to be
Well, and that's where,
eccentric.
we're always throwing around the additional diagnoses that could be in our cocktails, because the self-awareness around that. Also, though, reconnecting to, like, we grew up in a very specific group and community and
True.
space where that was less aware. We
yeah.
were less
Well,
aware.
and that was,
but
like,
are
present-
we
present,
the
eccentric
personality
people.
hire everywhere we go because we're just little quirky beans?
Yes,
Absolutely.
because we can sell ourselves, but
like,
man.
not in a mainstream way. We thought it was like, but it was because we were in this very specific world thriving.
Echo
But when you
chamber.
come out of that, people are like, what is this?
like, yeah, it's like, huh? And like, you'll
funny.
say things and they'll be like, whoa. And you're like, is this not normal?
You're like,
Do you not
Am
think
I
this way?
acclimating to this?
It's like, is this how you human?
Yeah. Do I look human?
Am I?
I'll never forget. Riley said that early in dating. We took a picture together and he stopped and he said, do I look human? And I thought it was so funny. He thought it was
Good,
just
honestly, good
like
question.
an alien
Good
moment.
question. Sometimes you
I don't know.
have those moments where you're like, I'm not of this earth. But then you
who
come back and you're
am
like,
I?
fuck yeah, let's go, Earth.
Transcendent.
Trying, or maybe not. Just happening. Something. Who knows? Who knows right now? We're figuring it out. The point is to not know. So let's go. But yeah, so whew, Nelly.
We've been just plowing through
Plowing,
topics. I think
yeah. How good? Well, yeah, producer. How long have we been talking?
About an hour and 15 minutes.
Hey,
That's great.
let's go.
my bladder's telling me, excuse me. That's about my timeline.
You're like, pardon me. That's it for me.
Ooh, I'm doing a little dance.
Deal. Okay, then we'll bring it back.
In
We'll-
it. But also, I'm
me
like,
too.
we can just do episodes of this. That was the whole.
That was
that's
it.
the whole premise.
We're talking about, yeah, and that's great. And we never know where things are gonna go.
No,
it's
I
very
love
fun
it.
to be figuring this out, but it's not. I feel like she's
feels
figuring it
good.
out.
It
We're
feels relevant. It feels
doing that.
authentic.
And that's the most important.
That's all we care about. That's
part.
all we're trying to do. It's
That's-
so uncomfortable. It's
it's
so
so-
awkward to create authentically. It's so foreign.
Comfortable.
It's so foreign.
So foreign, but I will say that I'm proud of us for wanting to do it and wanting to show up that way.
Yeah.
And that is us giving ourselves a lot of self-respect, because we can recognize that our experience matters, and what we have been through matters, and what we have learned matters as well. And I think that should go for everyone, no matter who you are. It's like what you've been through, like, really matters. And if it was hard for you and you have never talked about it, it still fucking matters that it was hard, and you deserve to be validated in that. And that's a part of what we're trying to do.
And trying to, like, own that space is so uncomfortable, and we're gonna do it together.
Yeah, better together. Everything's easier with a buddy,
Oh yeah,
especially Aaron's.
we have
we need a shadow.
to shadow everything. That's also neurodivergence in general.
Let's go.
I could do anything if I have a shadow.
No, I know. It's true. We can take on the world. Anyway, cool. Should we kind of like,
I think we should, like, bring it home.
let's go. Any final remarks?
I said so much. I feel like I was a little quiet in the first episode, and I'm like,
Rightly so.
I don't
but
want
this
to
is-
push it over the
This
edge
is a
here.
dialogue.
I know, it's great.
That's it. Nate's so bad. Great.
I love it.
I've chatted too. So thanks, y'all, for joining us. I hope you might have found this interesting, and if not that, maybe entertaining, because give on the old razzle dazzle, razzle dazzle them.
That's true.
Okay.
Wow, I
All
love
right, y'all.
it.
I love it.
Have a great night.
Enjoy. Take care of yourself. If you need a mental health day, please take
Oh
one.
my gosh, take one whenever you want and buy yourself a cute little treat.
Oh my God. Treat day forever.
I love
All right.
treats. Kiss a cat. Okay.
Mwah.
Mwah.